Hey, this is Brian.
And Shelby.
And you're listening to the Hyperspace
Pod Blast.
This week we're talking Thrawn, and we do spoil the novel, so if you haven't read it, go ahead and do that and come back later.
We're also doing a giveaway on Twitter, so be sure to check out that post for details. Aren't you a little short for a podcast?
Huh? Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hyperspace Pod Blast.
Hey, guys.
We have with us today a very special guest. You may know him because he's big and blue and has red glowing eyes. He's Thrawn. Okay, not really. His name is Jeff, and he is the Imperial Talker. What's up, Jeff?
Not much. What's up with you guys?
Oh, killing it like usual.
Yeah, chilling as much as you can on the surface of the sun.
Yeah. So anyway, we have Mr. Jeff here, the Imperial Talker. If you're familiar with him, you will see that his avatar on Twitter is Thrawn.
That's actually what I look like. Actually what I look like. You can't see me right now, but I am blue. I'm always blue with red eyes.
We're going to be talking about Thrawn today. We have old Thrawn, we have new Thrawn. So, Jeff, what do you think, taking both of those Thrawns into consideration, who is this guy? Like, is there an overall Thrawn, or are they two distinctly different people?
I think that you could make an argument both ways. I think that there are definite similarities that go beyond physical appearance and a white uniform.
Right, yeah.
We've gotten a sense with this new version of Thrawn that he is strategically gifted, he's tactically gifted. Although on the tactical note, I would say that we haven't really seen him do the sort of in-battle tactical stuff that we saw him do in the expanded universe novels, the Legends novels. I hate that word Legends, by the way. Whatever. What do you guys think? Do you think that he's like the same? Do you think he's different?
Well, to Shelby,
I can't say if I think he's the same or different, considering I've only read the new novel, and then briefly seen him on Rebels, but didn't really watch it. We're going through Rebels again, so.
You're like, you didn't pay attention.
Yeah, I was basically watching it, and she was in the room sometimes. That's how it worked.
So we started from the beginning, and I'm like watching all of Rebels right now.
Okay.
But I've seen him like physically be on Rebels. So I can't really say that I can compare the two, but I can comment on more of what my impression is, only knowing quote unquote new Thrawn.
Right.
What do you think, Brian?
So Brian, what do you think?
I didn't get into Thrawn too much. I read the Heir to the Empire series, but I think there was more, wasn't there, of Thrawn? Didn't he have like another?
It's called the Thrawn trilogy.
Right, but I mean, didn't he have other books besides those three?
Yeah. So he So just setting the stage, I guess, since I'm the Thrawn fanatic
You
here.
are the guru, for sure.
Timothy Zahn wrote, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command as the Thrawn trilogy, and then Thrawn started showing up in other places, like in the 1994. So the book, Heir to the Empire, was written in like 91, I think. And then Thrawn was used in the TIE Fighter computer game, if you remember that computer game.
I remember it very fondly, actually.
And, yeah, oh my gosh, I love that game. I never paid attention to the actual campaign, like what was going on. I just shot down a lot of Y-Wings.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were easy to blow
Yeah,
up.
they're slow.
Yeah, so and then, Timothy Zahn returned to Thrawn quite a few times, like with Outbound Flight, which sort of, sets the stage for when he is discovered like between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, like maybe 5 years after the Phantom Menace, and that ties into Heir to the Empire and sort of that whole story, and then there's sort of like tangential stories, like there's like a Thrawn clone at one point, and there's like a Thrawn impersonator at another point.
Okay, yeah, so that's the stuff I never read, but basically the old EU took anything that people liked and cloned it. That seemed to be like the go-to storytelling device.
In fact, there's like I don't remember what this was, but there was a quote from Timothy Zahn from a couple years ago where he basically said, like, this was before the whole the Disney canon came about, but he basically said that if he needed to bring Thrawn back at some point, he would do a clone, but he would do it in a way that, like, the clone of Thrawn knows that he's not Thrawn, and so there would be a lot of, like, that clone trying to figure out, like, who he actually is, I guess. So I don't know. It's you're right. Like the old EU, it was all they love doing clones whenever possible.
Yeah, and they started like before the prequels, like that one phrase from A New Hope, like fought with your father in the Clone Wars. They're like, oh, they said clone. That's what we can do for everything now, guys. We got this. Star Wars is gonna last forever because we can just clone anything.
But the thing about Thrawn, this goes back to your earlier question about which one I like better, which one is which do I prefer, I guess, or what are their similarities and differences. Mm-hmm. Thrawn's trajectory in the expanded universe, like once it started to get built up and like his backstory and everything, it's very different. It's very different than what has been established in the last, I guess, less than year since he was announced. Since it was announced he was going to be in Rebels, and then there was going to be the novel.
Yeah, he's, from what I can tell, there's definitely, like you said, overarching similarities. In my mind, he's a lot of, I don't know, the same idea of a person, just maybe it's kind of like what you mentioned that Zahn said, like this is that cloned version that still has some of the abilities, but isn't quite the same exact person.
Right. Well, and on that, the interesting thing there even is in terms of like the similarities and differences. So like in the Thrawn novel, which just came out in April, and that Shelby actually read.
She did.
Right?
Yes, I did read it.
That she read. That whole story at the beginning about him being quote unquote discovered.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil. Are we allowed to spoil things? Can we spoil
At this
things
point,
for people?
I'd say yeah, it's been out long enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so like obviously in the novel we find out that that was all staged, right? Like the Chiss, spoiler alert, blue people with red eyes for people out there who don't know, they're Chiss.
I thought they were Pantorans.
I thought that, I know, right? Like, are they related in any way?
Yeah.
Somebody asked Pop.
Yeah, there you go. He'll know.
But that story about him. So obviously at the end of the book, we find out that it was actually staged by the Chiss, that they wanted Thrawn to sort of infiltrate the Empire in that way.
He's basically the Chiss Ascendancy's Nomenor.
Right, and so that story about him being on, like, stranded or exiled, that was actually a short story that Zahn had already written. He basically just plagiarizes himself.
Oh, rad.
Cool.
The story, but he changes the sort of the meaning of why Thrawn is there. So, like, in the EU, he actually was exiled from the Chiss. Huh. He wasn't allowed to go back, but in this case... Well, now he is. Now it's like all part of a bigger plan, I guess.
Yeah, I actually like that aspect of it. The whole idea that he's just sort of using the Empire to see if they're going to be of any use to the Chiss, because his loyalties, I think, are still staunchly to his people and not the Empire.
For sure.
Right, yeah.
I would say that Thrawn is my favorite quote-unquote bad guy, but then I was thinking, well, I mean, can we really classify Thrawn as a bad guy? I almost don't think so.
I don't know how to classify him yet.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't feel like, I mean, there are some people that are just, pure evil, and I don't see that in Thrawn at all.
That's the interesting thing I think about him also being on, almost said Clone Wars, on Rebels. In Rebels, he kind of is just like an evil presence. Like, you don't get that sort of inner monologue backstory you get with a novel that sort of gives him a more, I don't know, relatable personality. In Rebels, he's just like this blue killing machine.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, the Rebels seem to be able to get away from him pretty easily.
Well, I mean, they can get away from anything because they're
right. They're the Rebels. Right. No, I want to hear more from Shelby, because I sort of know how I feel about Thrawn. I could probably go on about Thrawn for days. But I'm really curious, Shelby, to hear more about what you think about him. Like,
oh, well.
Now that you're experiencing him, and you had never experienced him before.
It's also important to note, this is my first ever Star Wars book, like ever.
Really?
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
Oh, the child in me just got really mad.
So it's my first Star Wars book, which if the rest are like this, I don't see why I wouldn't read all of them. But I really dig Thrawn. Like, super huge fan of Thrawn forever and ever, has been solidified because of this book, and I don't even really care what they're gonna show me in Rebels of him.
Interesting.
I honestly view him as like to his core a good person. Well, a good chiss.
Yeah.
So I find his intellect to be, super appealing to me in a character. I find his, ability to understand other people's emotions so well because it's such a tactical thing for him. I really like that. So I'm I don't know how you'd completely convey that on screen, whether it's animated or live action. How do you keep that essence of Thrawn? But maybe it's just like depending on people reading the book and truly understanding who he is. I'm not sure how you do it, but I want to see more of Thrawn, like always.
Well, it seems that we're gonna be, I guess, in the last season of Rebels. But do you think that you would like to personally see him show up in books more than seeing him in an animated show? Like, would you like to see him pop up more, like, in novelizations, and even if it's not about him specifically?
I think so. I mean, the thing is, I feel like it's almost difficult to have him pop up in stuff because I feel like Thrawn's presence is never just a pop-up kind of thing.
Right.
I feel like he could very easily take over any sort of situation because, that's just who he is and what he does.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that would mean I wouldn't want to see him in other books. I think I'd prefer to maybe just hear them mention about Thrawn being, on the other side of the galaxy doing something, or, just seeing people get caught up in his master plans of whatever those are. I would enjoy reading about that. I don't think that you can completely introduce him into a storyline without it taking over. Personally, in the book, I felt, as much as, I really didn't like Arinda at all when I first, was introduced to her character.
Yeah.
And, she was okay. She kind of grew on me, but throughout the book, it's more of I was almost a little bit annoyed that she was there and I had to read about her.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah, I actually agree too. Anytime I got to an Arinda part, I was like,
same.
Crud. Yeah. Gotta wade through this until we get Thrawn back.
Gosh.
Which I understand that their paths were linked, but you could say that about just anyone that crossed paths with Thrawn within the book. You could have picked just about any other character that occurred more than twice in his life. In this section of his life. But I don't know. I feel like she is a good character, but I feel like it was almost, offensive to throw her in there to compete with Thrawn. And I felt like it was a competing storyline.
Yeah, until they cross, their stories really cross paths. They're sort of paralleling each other for a while, and then when they do come together, it starts to make a little bit more sense. But yeah, I personally didn't really care for her sort of walking the streets of Coruscant.
Yeah.
I get that people do that.
Right.
That's a thing that happens.
It wasn't really my thing. It wasn't really my cup of tea when they did that.
I think they could have done better with her own book or paired her with some other character if they were going to do that.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I think Thrawn just completely overshadows anyone.
Yeah, I understand what you were saying, too, with, the parallels. You saw their different rises, and they both had that sort of challenge of rising in the Empire. Arinda as a female, even though we're kind of getting away from the old white male-only ideals of the Empire, but still, obviously, it's not as common. And then you have Thrawn as a non-human, which seems to be, as we mentioned in our Aliens episode, the new version of the prejudice. We're gonna be more inclusive of human races and genders, sexes, whatever you want to call them, but we're gonna keep the prejudice going with the whole non-human thing.
Right. And they do a good job of that in Rebels, showing Constantine really disliking Thrawn. The fact that Admiral Constantine, the fact that he really doesn't want to report to Thrawn, and he's legitimately surprised about this new rank of Grand Admiral. So I can appreciate that they have tried to capture some of that. But beyond that, I even in Rebels, I didn't really get the sense that Thrawn being there was really that big of a deal.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that maybe people already have to accept it at that point, but
Right.
you'd think that it's so out there because there's literally, aside from Mas Amita, but he's like from the old, still there, not someone that brought in new, you know what I mean? But those are literally the only two aliens I can think of that exist in the Empire.
Right. Well, I mean, they're not going to be they're not going to be having like a whole battalion of Duros stormtroopers anytime soon.
Yeah. They might have a whole battalion of Nogri, though. You never know.
Oh, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where that goes, since they've confirmed they're bringing at least one in. So
Right. Yeah.
So I have a question for you. What do you think is missing that was existing in EU version of Thrawn that we're not seeing right now?
Oh man. Battles. So the thing about Thrawn in the EU, and this goes right back to the character that Zahn created, is that you saw his big picture. Like he was very upfront, or Thrawn is very upfront with sort of his strategy. You don't necessarily get every piece of his strategy, but he's upfront about his strategy, what he's trying to accomplish, and at the same time, you sort of see him on a micro scale commanding in battles or being very. He's always 6 or 7 steps ahead of everybody when he's commanding, whether it's in a battle or it's his overall strategic vision, I guess, for a battle. And part of the reason that I really liked Thrawn when I started to read those novels back when I was younger was you would get that inner monologue of his, but it was more often played against the person who was next to him. So in this new Thrawn novel, that would be, what was his name? Eli Vanto.
Mm-hmm.
But in the EU, in the Thrawn trilogy, that was Captain Pelion. And so, Pelion would ask him, like, oh, why are we going to do this? Like, as if he's never commanded a ship before, even though he obviously has. And Thrawn would be like, because of this, this, and this, of course, why not? And Pelion would be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I would really like to see that doesn't really come across. I don't feel like that's coming across in Rebels as much. There's a lot of ominous moments where Thrawn is like, I'm going to defeat the rebellion. I'm going to tear them apart and stuff.
Right,
and it's
yeah.
hey, we get it. Let's dig in here. I know we only have 30 minutes, but tell me more, man. Come on, let's dig in. Explain to Callus or Yularen or Price, what you're going to do, because I want to know that.
Yeah, he does seem to keep everything really close to the vest. I mean, even in the novel, he gives Eli little tidbits. But the interesting thing I thought, and maybe this is out there, but I kind of picked up on his beginning of a chapter italics inner monologue stuff as Thrawn's version of the art of war.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what ends up being his journal entries to Vantos, I assume. I think that's what we're supposed to take from that. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But anyway, if you've ever read The Art of War, the way that he is sort of explaining things in generalities,
right?
Really, I don't know, resonated with the way that intro stuff was. But yeah, you don't really get a lot of that other than that. You know what I mean? That's why I think, back to what we were saying before, that I would like Thrawn a lot more written, because as we've seen him, at least so far, it's hard to convey that kind of inner monologue outside of written, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and on that, I would like for Vanto to show up again. I would
absolutely.
Yes.
Interact with Thrawn again in some capacity.
Yeah, I really like that character, actually. I'm really interested to see where he goes. And I'm surprised we haven't had the DJ is Eli Vanto speculation yet. So I think we should start that right now.
Why not? Why not? But, I still think that there's room for, and I know people are going to be like, no, this is definitely not going to happen. But there's still room to bring Thrawn into the post-Return of the Jedi picture in some way. I don't see why he couldn't be a First Order Admiral if he's still around.
Out. He may have pieced out and been like, bye guys, you guys can't help me. So.
Right. The interesting thing there, though, and this is something that's been kicking around in my mind since they announced it at Celebration Europe that Thrawn was coming back, is that Starkiller Base, on the galactic map, Starkiller Base is like next door neighbors to Scylla, which is the Chiss homeworld. So in the Thrawn novel, you know, there's too much going on with the Chiss ascendancy for them not to be a bigger thing at some point. So I just wonder if, like, maybe, like, as the First Order is starting to build, like after the Aftermath series, you know, as they're hiding, if maybe they're fighting with the Chiss out there in sort of the unknown regions.
I think it's very possible.
Yeah, that would be interesting, actually. I think I like the idea. I hadn't thought about it before, but the Empire crumbles and Thrawn's like, all right, going back to my boys now. See y'all. This didn't work out. And then we see him later in that capacity, like as a leader of the Chiss and not with the First Order. I think I would like that better, honestly.
Yeah. I think that could be a really interesting approach.
It would be really, really interesting to have that 3-tiered battle, you know, because Star Wars has always been X versus Y for the most part. I mean, in the bigger films and everything.
Or X versus Ty.
Wow. Shelby wins at Star Wars today.
Seriously, I'm just going to turn my mic off and go.
We're done.
I'm going to go get those hot dogs. Oh, yeah. But yeah, that 3-tiered, like, you know, I guess X versus Y versus Z. And I don't know. I don't think that Chiss, they don't seem to have, like, galactic domination in mind. They just want to keep their little neighborhood safe.
Yeah.
You know? So they could be fighting against the First Order, who seems to be maybe now pushing against their neighborhood. And then you have the Resistance fighting against the First Order. So now that would be really interesting, because that would be kind of like what sort of happened in the old EU, the Republic and the Chiss. Or I think it was first the Chiss and the Empire kind of were buddy-buddy, and then things moved around. But
plus, imagine meeting people who are somewhat similar to Thrawn, or the people who shaped Thrawn into who he is.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, imagine how big of a character, like, those people could be.
Yeah, and, you know, on that, at least in the EU, in the Outbound Flight novel, where you sort of get that backstory about Lieutenant Thrawn with the Chiss Ascendancy, you sort of see that. Like, it's focused on Thrawn and sort of his strategic vision in the moment, but then you also see around him these other Chiss characters who... They sort of see what Thrawn is doing, and they're actually helping him in really interesting and sort of behind-the-scenes ways. Like, they're sort of doing what Thrawn does and making it seem like they don't actually support him, when in fact they actually do support him. And it's just, you can definitely imagine, like, the First Order, like General Hux on one side and, like, soon-to-be General Dameron on the other one, like trying to navigate fighting this two-front war against an enemy that is just way smarter than you, and that you have to really change how you approach your tactics and everything to fight this ascendancy. With Thrawn at the head of it.
There you go. And then after that, the Yuzhong Guang come.
Oh, man. People would go crazy. And I mean that in a good and a bad way.
Oh, yeah. It would be like, it would be so splitting. It would be nuts.
Half of the fandom would have a heart attack, and the other half would have a heart attack out of excitement.
Yeah. So, some of us would be like excited, and the others would be like puking on their shoes. I think that's pretty much exactly what would happen.
Absolutely. And I look forward to the discussion that we have someday when Shelby decides to read Vector Prime and that whole series, like, going forward.
That's what I just said, that we're actually going to do a Twitter poll to see what she reads next. And we're going to throw some legends in there. And I said I'm going to pick 3, like, ho-hum novels and then Vector Prime in hopes that Vector Prime wins.
Well, speaking of which, though, Shelby, just out of curiosity, now that you're a fan of Thrawn because of reading this novel, do you think you're going to go back and read the Thrawn trilogy and sort of see what he was like in those EU novels, or are you just like, I don't want to go down that road?
Yep, I'm gonna read them. Mostly because Phil and So from Bright Tree Radio, they reviewed them recently, and even just like listening to their reviews, and I don't know, I was thinking whenever, okay, I'm gonna read books. All right, I'm gonna read Star Wars books. I'm just not gonna touch anything Legends because that's just too much. But the way that they present them really makes me actually want to. So yeah, specifically because I'm such a big fan of Thrawn now, I'm going to go back and read the Thrawn trilogy.
Nice. That makes me happy, obviously.
Yep, Legends lives, at least in this house.
The expanded universe lives.
Oh, yeah, sorry. How about old EU? I had this argument with someone one time about how the expanded universe still exists now. But anyway, I don't know. Nomenclature, who cares?
Well, I care.
Well, who really cares? That
I
matters.
really enjoyed, though, Thrawn being so interested in Eli's quote-unquote legends of the Chiss.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it.
That was straight up Zahn. I am of the opinion that was straight up Zahn, doing a huge wink to fans of the EU. I get you guys. I totally get it, guys and girls out there. You like Thrawn. I like Thrawn because I wrote Thrawn. Here's some little nods to that stuff.
Yeah, because I definitely think it's completely plausible to take, EU stuff, old EU stuff, legend stuff, and just cultivate what sort of overarching concepts they were trying to get across there to apply to these characters that are in quote unquote canon.
Yeah,
I'm down with it.
Yeah, that was. I think that's definitely a nod, a lot like what Filoni did with his whole line Ahsoka had, that there's always truth in legends or whatever it was.
Yeah,
it's along that same sort of tip of the hat type thing.
Well, and that just goes back to this question from the very beginning of this discussion, which one do you like better? Which similarities and differences? You can in anything, you can write characters differently for different types of stories. And if we think about Star Wars having elements of mythology and myth making and whatnot, if you think about ancient myth, they wrote and rewrote those stories and changed the hopes and desires and wants of characters all the time, and gods and goddesses and so on and so forth. So, whether somebody likes the EU Thrawn, whether somebody likes this new Thrawn, whether people don't like either of them, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really bother me. Like what you want and don't like what you don't want, and otherwise just appreciate the fact that you have these past stories, these EU stories, and now we're getting new stories that we can debate until the end of the earth. So.
Right, I kind of think about it as the whole the book was better version of when you see a movie. Now they're getting away from that, trying to recreate exactly the book when they do movies, and the old EU is sort of like the books, and then some of this new canon stuff is like the movie. It's like a reimagined version of the same thing.
Right.
So yeah, there's no reason you don't watch the movie and be like, oh, okay, well the book is garbage now. Both things can exist together.
I don't know.
Yeah, there are probably people like that, unfortunately.
Here's the thing, though, that we can totally take solace in, is that in 50 years, when we're all getting close to dying, Disney is just going to reboot all of this again. There's going to be a third version of Thrawn.
I actually said that to Shelby last night. That's funny.
It is funny because he's like, you're going to have to live through it.
Yeah, I was like, I'll probably be dead, but you'll have to live through it.
I said I'll be 90-some years old going, this is Hyperspace Pod Blast number 9246. And I hate this new stuff.
Why do you
I don't know, I'm probably... I'm not sure.
Let me tell your grandkids about this Chiss.
Oh,
awesome. But anyway, Jeff, tell the good people where they can find you on the interwebs.
Here and there, a little bit of everywhere. You can find me at Imperial Talker on Twitter, and you can also go to my site, which is imperialtalker.com, and I sort of post stuff on there whenever I feel like it, except every month I at least post some haiku, so that's exciting. And I just started an Instagram account because apparently that's a thing. So if you want to see what I look like, I'll just post constant selfies on there. Because
you do a good job at that,
and you can see how blue and red-eyed I really am doing that.
Yes, absolutely, very important.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show, Jeff. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. And like always, you can find us on Twitter at hyperspace_pod, and shoot us an email and tell us we're great, etc. at hyperspacepodblast@gmail.com.
Sweet. Thanks so much, Jeff. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.